Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. It's a very familiar passage if you've ever watched the Charlie Brown Christmas special. How it starts, or this is a portion of it. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to his own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. We'll get back to that in just a little bit. Okay, for all my history buff, how many people here love history? Watch the History Channel and all that stuff. I like it. Can anybody tell me what happened on December the 17th, 1903?
Wright brothers.
The Wright brothers made their first flight.
There you go. The Wright brothers made their first flight. Happened right here in North Carolina. Well, not right here in North Carolina. Way down there in Kitty Hawk. Orville and Wilbur Wright made their first flight at Kitty Hawk on their 5th attempt. Orville piloted the plane for a 12-second flight. Doesn't seem like big news to us now, but then it was. Wilbur rushed over to the local telegraph office and sent the following message home. We have flown for 12 seconds. We will be home for Christmas. Upon receiving the telegram, Orville and Wilbur's sister Catherine went to the newspaper office, all excited, and told the editor about her brother's new flying machine and the flight, and informed him they would be home for Christmas if they would like to set up an interview. He told her that he would be sure to have it in the paper regarding the boys. 2 days later, December the 19th, the local paper placed the following headline on page 6 of the paper. Wright brothers, home for Christmas. The most important story of the year, arguably of the century, man's first flight. And the editor missed it. He got part of the story, but the most important thing he missed altogether. And I wonder if the same can be said about us when it comes to Christmas. If we look around, beautifully decorated tree, the music is festive, the season is upon us, it's right. It's only 18 days left to shop before Christmas. It seems just like last week that we had our fall festival, and like yesterday was Thanksgiving, and now 2 more weeks have passed. We're all so busy. Good things. I love this time of year. I love all the things that go with it. The combined choir cantata that we worked for and had Friday night, it was great. It was a blast. Loved it. But it was busy. Work parties to go to. We're going to one with Katie's school on Friday night. I look forward to it. But it's busy. She's going to have to cook and all this stuff. And we're going to have to go all the way to Greenhill. All the way to Greenhill. Planning family get-togethers. Christmas shopping. It takes forever to Christmas shop. Now here's what I wonder. I wonder if all in our rushing around and all of our gift buying and all of our parties and all the get-togethers and all the things that we have to do during this season, that we get a little bit of it, but have we missed the most important truth? Jesus has come to earth to bring salvation. We started our series last week titled, I'm Dreaming of a Right Christmas. Last week we talked about having the right focus, that yes, Jesus is the reason for the season, but more to the point, the reason is our salvation. My sin, your sin, had to have a way for atonement, for ransom once and for all. That was our focus. God loved us so much that He sent His one and only Son to give His life on the cross as ransom for our sin. That's the right focus for Christmas. And now this week's point, for there to be a right Christmas, we have to have the right pace about all of this. To be honest, Christmas is a time when life goes from here to wide open, right? It starts at Thanksgiving and it doesn't stop until after Christmas. We have to buy presents for all those that we love, and all those that we feel that we have to buy presents for. We decorate our homes. We have grand meals to prepare, people to visit. Sometimes we get tired just thinking about all the things that we have to do that have become Christmas for us. In our rush, are we so busy that we forget to really celebrate Christmas? And you know, ours is not the first generation to bring about a hurried pace when it comes to Christmas. The very first Christmas had a hurried pace as well. And we're going to talk about some patience that was there later. But it was a lot of things took place in a very short time. Mary discovers she's pregnant. She runs to her cousin Elizabeth's home to share the news. Caesar Augustus declares that a census must be taken. All the citizens are required to go to the city of their birthplace, and suddenly all the roads are filled with travelers. The shepherds, upon hearing the angelic announcement of the birth of Christ, it says they hurry off to Bethlehem. And soon the wise men, they see the star and they begin hurriedly packing up and making their voyage from the east. Herod, full of jealousy and fear, he believes that Jesus is a threat to his power and his kingdom and his throne, and he issues a decree that hurry up and round up all the boys that are under 2 years of age. And then all their parents, you know, they hurry and they pack up and they leave to flee from Herod. So as you can see, Christmas rush is not a symptom of modern times and modern people. Yet the Apostle Paul wrote later about the first Christmas. In Galatians 4, he writes, "When the right time came, the time that God decided on, He sent His Son, born of a woman, born as a Jew, to buy freedom for us who were slaves to the law so that He could adopt us as His very own sons." So Paul says that when everything was right, when God's timetable was set, that He chose a little town called Bethlehem. An unknown couple of plain, ordinary young folks, Joseph and Mary. The setting of a barn and a manger. All this on His timetable to save the world. It was a right Christmas because it was on God's time. Maybe you feel overwhelmed this Christmas. Maybe you feel overwhelmed every Christmas. Maybe your pace is too hurried. Maybe you're so busy doing the things that have become Christmas that maybe you've forgotten what Christmas really is. This morning I want you to see how to have a right Christmas by having a right pace during this season. I want to challenge everyone to slow down, to not simply do Christmas, but to truly grasp the importance of it and enjoy Christmas. For us to have a right pace, we must experience patience. And you know, patience is not just waiting on something. Patience is waiting with anticipation, with a gut hunger that you just are longing for it. That's the way we should approach Christmas. Listen to the words of David, King David, as he cries out to God in Psalm 40. He says, "I waited patiently for the Lord." He waited with that hunger, with that longing, with that expectation that God was going to move in his life. And he says, "I waited patiently for the Lord to help me. And He turned to me and He heard my cry. He lifted me out of the pit of despair, out of the mud and the mire. And He set my feet on the solid ground and steadied me as I walked along. He has given me a new song to sing, a hymn of praise to our God." Is it possible that this Christmas your song has faded? Do you need a new song? If you have a right Christmas, you have to have a new song placed by God in your heart. A right Christmas We read about it. I read about it earlier. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. So Joseph went up from the town of Nazareth to Galilee, to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because that's the house he belonged to. And he went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be his wife, and she was expecting a child. And while they were there, the time came, just the right time, came for the baby to be born. And she gave birth to her firstborn, a son, wrapped him in, I like the old version, swaddling clothes, and placed him in a manger because there was no room for him in the inn. Note the Prince of Peace patiently came when the time was right. There's a price of patience in that first Christmas. Do you find it difficult to wait on things? Do you? I don't like to wait. I found that out yesterday when we went Christmas shopping. I don't like to wait. I don't like it when people get in my way. I don't like it when I have to. We had some things we picked up and we looked and the line was this way, then that way, and this way, and this way. And you know what we did? Put it down, wait. I don't want to wait. We live in a world where patience is lacking. Instant gratification. Anybody having a hard time finding the right gift for a person in your life? Why do we have such a problem buying someone something? It's because we already have everything. Used to be, I can remember when I was growing up, you got presents twice a year. You got something on your birthday, and you got something at Christmas. And you got some plain pocket jeans before school started, and they have to last you the whole year. It used to be that if a person wanted something special, they waited for the birthday or they waited for Christmas and hoped that they got it. Nowadays, we can't wait that long. If there's something we want, we go get it. Whether we can afford it or not, we go get it. And that same kind of impatience carries through the rest of our lives as well. We are people who do not like to wait. It's not a part of our culture. Waiting's not. It doesn't matter what we have to wait on. We don't like it. If you're hungry, you don't have to wait till supper's cooked. Go through the drive-thru. If you don't have time, there are people that go through the drive-thru at McDonald's 6 times a week for supper. There are. I know them. They do. We don't even have to go. You know, in some places, all you do is pick up the phone and they bring your food to you. Deliver it right to your door. I guess we have pizza. That's about the only place we do that. But you don't want to wait that long? Just throw a can of soup in the microwave. In 2 minutes, you're ready to eat. Need money? I can remember when, if you needed cash, you had to go to the bank in operating hours, and you had to stand in line because everybody had to go to the bank, and you got the cash. Now, you go through the drive-thru at the ATM, or you don't even have to do that. You can just carry your phone, and when you go buy something, just wave it in front of the thing, and there it is. You know, you don't need cash. Don't have to wait for anything. Communication, cell phones. I can remember our phone was on a party line, and our neighbor Maybelle talked on that phone constantly. We had to wait patiently if we wanted to make a phone call. Nowadays, you just pull your cell phone out, and you can look someone in the eye over your phone who is on the other side of the world. Instantly. Want coffee? Don't have to wait for the pot to brew. Just throw a pod in the Keurig. You're ready to go. 15 seconds. Instant rice, instant coffee, instant pudding, and television enforces all of this as well. You know, there are no problem that's too large that it can't be handled in a 30-minute show. No crime can't be solved in under an hour. They all are. There's not an illness that's too serious it can't be healed in a 30-second commercial. Everywhere you look, patience is lacking. The price of patience became real the first Christmas. Joseph and Mary discovered God's plan through an angel. Fear gives way to excitement, which leads to patience. Babies don't come quickly. 9 months would pass before the promise was fulfilled. Meanwhile, Jerusalem there's an aged couple there, Zechariah and Elizabeth, who are being rewarded for their years of faithful patience in the birth of a son named John, who would be the forerunner of Jesus Christ. For 400 years, God had been silent, and now He was moving in a mighty way. The Messiah and His forerunner born the same year, just a few months apart. Patience just may be one of the greatest tools that God uses to conform us to His will. Patience requires us to wait upon the Lord, even when God is silent. Israel waited 400 years for God to speak, and when God spoke, Joseph and Mary were ready. They were scared, but they were ready. They were patiently submitting to God's plan. They patiently waited for the birth to come. They patiently traveled to Bethlehem. And when there was no room in the inn, they patiently went to the barn, knowing that God had the best plan. No complaining. We don't read about any complaining on their parts in Scripture. No complaining, no doubts, simply trusting God. Are you willing to pay that price of patience this Christmas? Are you willing to seek God's will in your life, in your schedule, in your Christmas spending, in your decisions of what you're going to do, what's going on your calendar? Are you practicing patience with other people this season? I was reminded, I didn't originally put this in this message, but as we were standing in line at a store yesterday, it came to me. There was people that weren't being patient with each other. If I saw one kid get whacked, I saw 100 kids get whacked running around in the store yesterday. Parents were not patient with their children. Children were not patient with their parents. And this verse came to me from Ephesians 4. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. I didn't see much love being passed around yesterday. In the hurriedness of this season, God may be calling you to wait to discover His will for your life. Joseph and Mary were patient, and God used them to fulfill His divine plan. I want to remind you that you have a part in that plan as well. Be patient. Wait on the Lord. And patience reminds us that God is faithful. Mary and Joseph knew that at the end of 9 months, their patience would be rewarded with a son. The wise men's search, their patience, their diligence led them to a place of worshiping the King of Kings face to face. Christmas should always remind us that God is faithful to His Word and God is faithful to us. And it should remind us that it's according to His timetable. And the price of patience leads us to the pursuit of patience. One of the most difficult lessons to learn at Christmas or any other time of the year is the pursuit of patience. I mean, even when it comes to asking God for patience, when do we want patience?
Now.
Right now. God, help me be patient. Give me patience. Right now. The Apostle Paul told the Galatian church that their life was to be characterized by the fruit of the Holy Spirit, one of which is patience. Patience is a learned activity from a life guided by the Holy Spirit's power. You ever wondered why God chose to come to the world in the form of a baby? Maybe it's because babies move at their own schedules. No matter how much we long for the baby to come, it still takes, give or take a little bit, 9 months for a healthy baby to be born. And if you think it takes patience waiting on a baby to be born, just wait till the baby's born. Then you really have to develop patience. And as they grow, as you help them learn to walk, talk, and feed themselves, take care of themselves. In fact, a baby's survival is based on our patience. Patience is necessary when we care for a child, but with all the work, with all the time, all the sacrifice it takes to raise a child, we still call the birth of our children a blessing. Why is that? It's because the pursuit of patience with them is always rewarding. It's always a blessing. The first Christmas was a Christmas of patience. Yeah, there was a lot of hurried things going on, but there was also patience being played out. From the announcement of the birth to Mary from the angel, to the presentation of Jesus at the temple, people pursued patience and they were rewarded. There are several lessons we learned from the first Christmas regarding pursuing patience. And the first is that waiting is easier when you wait with someone. That first Christmas, you seldom see anyone alone in Scripture. Mary and Joseph are together. Their journey to Bethlehem. They're together in the stable. There are several shepherds abiding their flocks in the field. The wise men, we don't know how many there were. Might have been 3, might have been 300. But they traveled in a large caravan. Matter of fact, the only person that we really see alone at all in the Christmas story is Herod. Matthew's Gospel tells us that Herod met with the wise men in secret to discover the birth of Christ. And I believe that Herod, left alone with his thoughts about the situation, he began to distort things out of his fear. Herod was a twisted and demented person. He feared all the time that someone was trying to usurp his authority and overthrow it. He had family members killed because of that. So he begins alone to distort what's going on, and his fear soon lead him to issue the decree that brought the death of many innocent boys in Bethlehem. It's always important to have someone with you while you're waiting. Whether it's in the hospital waiting room, if you're sitting there by yourself, your mind goes to the worst things possible. If you got someone to wait with you, not so much. Or if you're waiting at the airport, if you're waiting in life on the return of Christ, it's easier to be patient when we wait with someone else. The writer of Hebrews says this in chapter 10, "Let us not give up meeting together, being together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." As believers, we wait for the appearance of Christ. Ever since He ascended, people have been waiting eagerly, anticipating His return. But we don't just sit around and wait and sit around in our homes by ourselves. You see, while we wait, we are to encourage one another and to lead other people to eagerly await His return. And we lift one another up, and we hold each other accountable for the purpose of growing in spirit and in spiritual discipline. And waiting is easier when you can understand and grasp that the end of the waiting is near. While Joseph and Mary didn't understand all that was happening in their life, there's no way they could have grasped the fullness of what was going on in their lives. But they knew enough to know that God was bringing about salvation to mankind. When the angel visited Joseph, he gave him specific instructions which would tell Joseph that salvation was coming through this baby. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. And all this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. Why were Joseph and Mary able to pursue patience? It's because they knew salvation was near. When you know that something great is coming, the waiting is not as hard. As believers, our lives should be more patient and less stressful, because we know that every day draws us closer to the return of Christ. One day, all of the pain of life will be gone. One day, all the suffering, one day, all the tribulations, all the trials, all the heartaches are going to give way to glory. And just as the participants of the first Christmas pursued patience, so must we pursue patience as we eagerly await for Christ's return. The pursuit of patience is about God keeping His promises. Psalm 33 says, "For the word of the Lord is right and true. He is faithful in all He does." God was faithful to His word that first Christmas. God is faithful to us now. But we pursue Him this Christmas. And we want to have the right focus. We want to have the right pace. So hopefully we understand that God works through His timetable. And God is faithfully working to bring about His will. So let's talk about some practical ways that we can have a right pace this Christmas. First thing is to take inventory of your schedule. You know, we were talking the other day that it seems like there's just about something every day between now and Christmas and we said we better start writing it down or we're going to miss something. Take some time to think about what you're doing during this Christmas season. Think about, is it a necessary thing that we're so busy? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Maybe it's something that you want to do. Maybe it's something that you feel that you're obligated to do. Maybe it's something you don't want to do, but you know you're going to have to do it anyway. Do we really? Are we so caught up in the pace of Christmas that we feel like by the day after Christmas we just want to be done with it all? Decorations put away, house clean, and we just want to take a vacation. Ask yourself, am I so busy doing Christmas that I'm forgetting Christmas? Maybe we need to follow the words of the psalmist when he says, "Be still and know that I am God." Christmas can be a stressful time for everybody. I mean, you got to clean the house before you decorate. Then you got to decorate. Then you got to clean the house after you decorate. Then you got all the preparations for all the festivities, the relatives to invite over, the friends to invite over, and you get through with that. Then you have to go to the next relatives, and you finish that. You got to get in before you know it. You've had 4 suppers in one afternoon. You got to make all the cookies, all the cakes, all the candies, all the gifts you have to buy. You have to wrap them all. It's endless. Under those conditions, I don't think there's anyone who wouldn't feel stressed. A few tips to prepare to help house the right pace. Before opening the gifts on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, your work party, or whatever get-together you're at that you exchange gifts, read the Christmas story. Just stop before you do all that. Someone opens the Bible and read from Luke 2, verses 1 through 19. Slow down and remember that it's not about the gifts. It's not about the good food and the gluttony that we pursue. It's not about all those things. It's about God. Remember, if you don't have Christmas in your heart, you're not going to find it under a tree, in a store, in a gift. It comes from Christ. Another suggestion I read this week, I never thought about this, but it's pretty easy, pretty simple, is a family had a tradition of reading Christmas cards that they received in the mail that day by sitting down together as a family for one meal that evening, opening the cards that come that day, reading them, and praying for the family who sent them. A time to slow down and put the focus back on God. And maybe on the big day, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, but on Christmas Eve especially, if you go to your family's home and it's somewhere else, instead of just hurry and get home, go with them to their church or a community church if they don't go to church, and worship together. If your family comes here, instead of hurrying and getting them out the door, bring them to church. Spend 1 hour together as a family worshiping God at our Christmas Eve service. You'll be glad that you do. It's one of the most holy times of the year. It's awesome. Determine in your heart not to be overbooked, not to be overwhelmed in setting a right pace for this Christmas. If we don't have a right pace, if we're so hurried and rushed that we're anxious, that we're annoyed, that we're angry, then we have no peace. And how can we expect to honor the one who brought peace into the world? I'm dreaming of a right Christmas. A Christmas that's not only has the right focus on Christ and my salvation, but a Christmas that's marked with the right pace. And I challenge everyone here to do the same thing. In this season that is at times marked with a maddening rush, let's remember that God is faithful, that God is always moving in our midst at His timetable, and that if we will allow Him to work in that, help us to slow down, that this Christmas will be one to remember.